So I want to talk about eclipses. I want to talk about this upcoming eclipse season and do a little bit of preparation. I know it's a little ways out here. We're looking at about 5 weeks until the first eclipse, but in my opinion, it's never too early really, and certainly we're in that pocket where it's time to start thinking about the eclipses. So I want to break down how I would be preparing and some strategies you can use to get ready for these very intense eclipses in late October, early November. Alright, so welcome to my channel. This is S.J. Anderson. Glad you are here. I talk about astrology on this channel, and in this video, like I said, I want to break down eclipse preparation. I'm not going to dive too deeply into the charts. I'm going to save that for maybe when we get closer, but I want to talk about more of timing and using the timing that astrology is so good at to help us understand themes that may be emerging and to get ready by looking back at what these eclipses may be bringing for you, for us in general, all of those things. And let's just start with Ptolemy, because Ptolemy has this wonderful quote in chapter 5 of the Tetrabiblos. That's book 2, chapter 5. And he says, the strongest and principal cause of all these events exists in the ecliptical conjunctions of the sun and moon, and in the several transits made by the planets during those conjunctions. What he's talking about is solar eclipses, when the sun and the moon conjoin very close to the sun to the ecliptic. And that's where eclipses come from, when the moon crosses that ecliptical path and you have syzygies, full moons or new moons. Full moon is a lunar eclipse, a new moon is a solar eclipse. And he basically says here, you look at the eclipse moment and then you look at the other 5 traditional planets, the non-luminary traditional planets, to read the energy and the feel of the eclipses. So it's really a beautiful theory of astrological delineation, actually, and that is you look at benefics, malefics, and Mercury to paint the colors, you might say, upon those luminaries. What those luminaries are lighting up or not lighting up are the colors of the other planets. And so the first major point of timing is to understand that both eclipse seasons in 2022 include, will have included when it's all said and done, eclipses in the same 2 signs, and those are eclipses in Scorpio and in Taurus. Because of that, we're dealing with Mars and Venus as major themes of these eclipses. What is being eclipsed? Well, it's our Mars, our Scorpionic Mars, and our Taurian Venus. Mars and Venus are planets of relationship. They're planets of relating with other people. They're planets of the pleasures we derive from relating with other people. They are planets of our deeply held beliefs about relationships and about people and about the actions by which we engage and generate pleasure and connection. And so right away, that's a major theme of this whole eclipse cycle and of the eclipses in 2022. And so, begin thinking about, that's one way to just begin thinking about in your own life. What about these themes of relationships and pleasures and others and, living with others and fighting with others and the love that we have for others, the kind of passions that are triggered in these relationships. Sometimes we hate and love the same person. That's why we love them, because they've gotten under the skin and deeply embedded in our selfhood. That's Scorpio, right? Fixed water, the deep kind of seated martial wounds that can arise in relational interaction. I think most generally, that's one major theme of these eclipses. Now, the second point I want to bring your attention to, and this is where we start getting into the timing. See, the beautiful thing about this eclipse season that's coming up in October and November, we've already had 3 eclipses in this axis. And so we have evidence, we already have working evidence of what these eclipses may bring. That's the major theme of the video. We have life experience, recent life experience, to pull from, to understand what's happening during this phase or season of life. First date I want to point out to you, November 19th, 2021, the first eclipse this cycle in Taurus, and it was a lunar eclipse right near Algol. Remember that November Algol lunar eclipse last November. Think about that time, what's beginning to be triggered in your life around this time, because that story likely began here, and we're still engaged with the themes that may have been triggered at this time. Second date I want to bring to your attention is 18 January 2022, and that's when the true nodes actually entered the Taurus-Scorpio axis. See, for that first eclipse in November, the nodes were still finishing their time in Gemini, Sagittarius. But that syzygy, that full moon, was close enough to the nodes as they were right about to cross boundaries a few months later that we got an eclipse. But this is when, early January, the story deepens. Your eclipse story, our eclipse story, this cycle deepens when the true nodes entered Taurus, Scorpio. Now, the mean nodes, I think, entered a few weeks before. But basically January, you might say. And look back at that month, middle of January, what shifted, maybe relationally. And keep in mind, every chart's different. So Taurus, Scorpio, in any given chart may be activating different house topics. I can't explore those here because this video is not designed to do that. This isn't like a eclipse predictions for all 12 signs. That's a lot of work. I prefer to kind of operate on a higher level of symbolism that's applicable no matter the house topics that are triggered, even though it's always better to get specific. That's what the consultation space is for. But so let's come back here. Keep in mind this date. Think back. What went down? What happened? And I think in our reality, the first story that I think of is one of the major stories of this eclipse cycle in the mundane astrology is the invasion of Ukraine. That happened on 24 February, just about 5 weeks after those nodes ingressed. Remember, Mars and Venus are both the two planets of war in our astrological system. Venus goes back to Babylonian mythology, where the goddess that Venus corresponded with was a war goddess. Mars, of course, in the Hellenistic and Roman mythology is the war planet. And right as these nodes enter this axis, we get this trigger of war. So that's one major story I'm looking at for this eclipse season upcoming. Now, the third dates I want us to explore would be the dates of those eclipses. And what I want you to do here, what I'm doing here is hopefully encouraging you to look at your own autobiography, biography, life experience with these dates and see what happened and see what is still in play and be then preparing yourself for October 25th, solar eclipse in Scorpio, and then November 8th, lunar eclipse in Taurus, because these themes may have another moment of punctuation. But here it is, it's the April 30 solar eclipse. What a solar eclipse. We had that stellium in Pisces, where all the rulers of that eclipse are conglomerating there in Pisces. What a revelatory eclipse. The thing about this eclipse I want to point out for the mundane is that this is right when that decision around Roe v. Wade was leaked. So in America, this is the abortion rights Supreme Court case. There was a decision that turned the regulatory powers over abortion to the states. And so a lot of states basically ban abortion immediately. It's a major theme when you start thinking about Taurus and Scorpio, right? Sexual organs, that's Scorpio. In our planetary health models, our zodiacal health association, Scorpio is the reproductive and Taurus is the feminine. And so we had an eclipse in Taurus where there was some blockage of reproductive issues and women's rights issues. That, I think, is a major theme that will reactivate very possibly during this eclipse that's going to happen on the 8th of November, the lunar eclipse in Taurus. It's election day in America, midterms. And of course, people are going to be talking about which states will then be likely to ban abortion, etc. So that's a major, again, another major theme that's timed with this eclipse cycle. So next date to think about would be this 16 May lunar eclipse in Scorpio. This is the first eclipse in the sign of Scorpio, this whole eclipse cycle. And that's a whole nother part of the axis here, right? A whole nother sector of the chart. Very much consider what's happening. And I want to tell you this here, when you delineate eclipses, it's not just the house that the eclipse is happening in, it's the planets that are in the sign of the eclipse. Those planets have responsibility over other sectors of the chart. And so very often, like let's say your ascendant ruler is in Scorpio, but that would be your like third house. Let's say you're a Virgo rising with Mercury in Scorpio, and this eclipse is, even anywhere in Scorpio, but maybe even closer to your Mercury there. You would think about also themes related to selfhood, because the ruler of the first is involved in the eclipses in terms of the natal planet, the natal ruler of the first. So you could think about that, just keep that in mind. I wanted to say that here. Some of you that are more advanced astrologically will know what I'm talking about. Others of you, you can just set that aside. Take what works, leave the rest. I do my best to try to speak in plain language here, to give you at least something that if you don't know anything about astrology, it can be useful. But think about May 16th. So we had 30 April, May 16th. This pocket is really the main message here of the video, like look back to that period, late April, first half of May. That was our first eclipse season in the same signs. What went down in your life, and get ready for a return of some of those themes. And that's the simple message of the video. I can just turn it off now. Now I'm going to land the plane elegantly, but so that's the basket of these dates. Now there's one other thing I want to share before I go into a little bit of a preview of these eclipses. So here's the tweet I want to share. We've taken a look just briefly at the dates of those earlier eclipses. But here's a tweet. This is back in May, and I said both 2022 eclipse seasons have 2 eclipses along the Taurus-Scorpio axis. So Czech, we've looked at that. A planet stationing retrograde in Gemini between eclipses. So the first eclipse cycle, you had what was stationing? It was Mercury stationed retrograde in Gemini between eclipses. This eclipse cycle, Mars will station retrograde in between the 2 eclipses. So it's like 28 October-ish. I can get the exact date up here in a second. Mars stations retrograde. After that, solar eclipse in Scorpio. Jupiter changing signs between Pisces and Aries between eclipses. So both eclipse seasons saw Jupiter go over that boundary between Pisces and Aries. You're going to get that again this fall. And so I was saying here back in May, pay attention to this current reality for clues about navigating the fall. That's this video. That's what the video is, this tweet. But let's just skip ahead. Let's check out these dates and the charts here of the eclipses that are about to hit us, 5 weeks only away. And the first one is 25 October. You can see here this solar eclipse. I think we might start feeling the eclipse intensity in the days right before this, upon the moon's ingress into Libra on the 23rd Sunday early in the morning here in Central Europe, 23 October, because the moon and sun will be co-present. Even though the eclipse comes in the sign of Scorpio, the moon and the sun are now sharing that sign in that Libran moment that will so dramatically shift as both the sun and Venus enter Scorpio. Venus gets a lot more challenged upon that time. And then you have the eclipse here on the 25th. So this is the first date just to be aware of. This is what we're preparing for, in my view, in this video, is starting about 23 October, the intensification of the Scorpio solar eclipse. Again, Mars plays a major role, planet of war. Venus is mixing directly with the sun there, almost out of the heart of the sun, but severely hampered by an eclipse solar energy. I don't think you can add much value to Venus because of that. The south node. I think this is going to require a lot of spiritual fortitude as we brace for the collective energy of war, economic, the inflation story that was happening in the first eclipse cycle. There was crashes in crypto. There was all sorts of intense transpirings, and so look for more of it here starting October 25th. The 8 November lunar eclipse in Taurus. We've already had a lunar eclipse in Taurus last November, exiled Venus, and then you have Mars now retrograde ruling the sun and Venus and Mercury. Mercury is Cazimi technically in this eclipse, so maybe there's some mercurial powers that we can sort of deploy to soften the blow. Maybe we can check ourselves as the emotions are intense. Okay, is this emotion real? Is this fear really based in reality? Maybe write out some of the fears and look at those fears on paper, share them with someone. It might help us navigate the intense eclipse moment here. But that's the pocket we're preparing for. Now, when would this eclipse season be over? The first candidate of a date would be the 9th of November, Wednesday, the next day, in the afternoon in Central Europe, when the moon leaves Taurus. So it's now left the sign of the location of its eclipse. Maybe the outermost date of this eclipse season window may close here 24 November with the new moon in Sagittarius. I think this will be a nice refreshed and refreshing new moon. You'll have Venus there still with Mercury, but they're out of the sign of the eclipsed axis, that fixed axis. And Jupiter is now stationing direct here in this new moon chart. Jupiter is squaring and ruling Sagittarius and squaring from Pisces. So this feels very much like a new beginning and a fresh start. We're going to get it quite quickly here with the first syzygy after eclipse season, this new moon. A stationing direct Jupiter, blocks are removing, full speed ahead, moving into really the new year. And so much is going to happen in 2023. I'm going to do a breakdowns, top transits of 2023. I'm excited to do that work and share all of that with you. But I hope this video is just giving you some higher level ideas about how to prepare using past timing, thinking about your life, reflecting on what happened, and then looking at these dates. 23 October to about 24 November, that whole month of an eclipse cycle with peaks on 25 October, peaks on 8 November. So get ready for it, love yourself, love those around you if you can. The self-talk is always so important. And I recommend always with eclipse season, pray, meditate, supplication, surrender to the divine, supplication just in the form of show me, please help me, show me. These are not times to be, in my view, asserting the will and the reality. They're times to be riding the waves of intensity with an attitude of kind of bracing and maybe retreating even with your spiritual practices. If you can. Often eclipses have a life of their own, and we aren't able to do that as much as we'd like, but try it. If you're more agnostically inclined, you can just get introspective. That would be what I would recommend, and the word that I would recommend as a major theme of an eclipse season, attitudinal strategy. So, okay, take care of yourself. Have a wonderful week.